Hey there, this is Manisha. Welcome back to season 2. Picture this. It's November 2019, and after months of research and product development, you finally launch a casual all day sneaker brand targeted at men. And then, kaboom! COVID strikes. Suddenly, no one is going to the office and much less needs shoes. What now? This week, I'm in conversation with Utkarsh Biradar and Ganesh Balakrishnan of Flatheads, and we unpack what unfolded over the last few months and what the future holds. We'll also explore how they got to this point and what they did up until November 2019. Let's dive in, shall we? Utkarsh, you're a design engineer, and Ganesh, you're a marketing strategy guy. And both of you graduated from IIT Bombay and then went on to work for Honeywell. And it's at Honeywell that the story actually begins, right? So why don't you fill us in?
Okay, so actually me and Ganesh were together at IIT Bombay. While I was studying design, he was doing his BTech in mechanical. And so we knew each other, some hostel rivalry, some sort of, early student friendship and all kind of thing. We lost touch actually. Ganesh left to study at the US. And so we almost lost touch for about 15 years or so. I took my path, worked in a couple of Indian brands, primarily entertainment electronics, and then came to Honeywell in the product strategy group. And at some point, we were starting an entrepreneurial venture, India for India kind of business at Honeywell. And we were interviewing folks for a few positions that we wanted to expand into. And after 15 years, I met Ganesh in the interview room. And it was like, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? So Ganesh was like, I'm here to give the interview. So I said, I'm here to take it. And needless to say, we started working together, which means, of course, Ganesh got hired. The interview was over in a few minutes. And yeah, that's how we sort of met after a long time. Ganesh, any quips from your side on how we actually started Momo? If you will.
Sure. So, as Utkarsh said, after a long while meeting old friends, it so happened that we were working on an entrepreneurial venture in Honeywell, which was basically looking at India for India applications for Honeywell technologies, right? So, we were incubating and creating new business portfolio for Honeywell here for the India and the Asia Pacific market. And it so happened that the chemistry was perfect between the two of us. The thought processes and the skill sets were very complementary. Right, he came in from a left field, design perspective. I came in from the classic marketing and strategy perspective. And we said, if we can do this inside a corporate setup, why can't we do this on our own? And that was the genesis of our entrepreneurial journey.
How did you decide on e-wallets? That was your first venture, right? You guys are first generation entrepreneurs, if I'm right.
When we actually jumped off the bandwagon and we started, so it was like big days. Suddenly you are off everything. You don't have any money coming in on a monthly basis. So it's a little bit of a out of your comfort space kind of. One of the things we used to do in the early stages was to supplement some of our working along with some consulting projects. And so I used to pitch for consulting projects. One of the things that was sort of bothering me was like you have across the world, people drive in, pick up their food, pick up their coffee and go out. So we were actually thinking of doing some such sort of a quick checkout or a drive-through kind of an idea. So that was one of the ideas. And later on we said, okay, maybe we can pitch this to one of the existing coffee chains in India and see if it will work. So we were intrigued by quick checkouts. You come into a retail store, you've sort of got your cart full of stuff, and then you come to the counter and then you sort of get jammed behind 15 other people. And so we were seeing a lot of abandoned carts. We were seeing that, okay, people want to grab a coffee, but they don't have the time. So we were actually out to solve this particular quick checkout thing. And at that point, somewhere the aha moment was that, so why just for a coffee or a fast food place? Why not for all the places? You come in, you sort of, pay the guy through your phone, and you pick up your stuff and you walk out. So it was a sort of a aha moment. It was not there. So it was like completely blue ocean, or just a non-existent thing in the market. There were a lot of all the wallet players were doing recharges and couponing and things like that, but nobody was solving this for the real world. And we thought that it was like a brilliant thing. We quickly started and we said, let's try this at a couple of places. Uh, we just walked into through somebody's connect. One of our friends knew somebody who owned a restaurant, and we ran this past them. And he said, "Yeah, why don't you build it? I'll try it." And so, yeah, we found our first customer, and it sort of took off from there.
Wow. And so did the, you, one of you is ex-Bain and you both are from IIT Bombay, and I think Ganesh, you're also from IIM Bangalore. Did these networks really come in use at any point in time? Were they useful, and how did that pull in?
So I think the alumni network across IITs, IIMs, as well as the Bain Professional Network, which I was a part of, and I'm part of now as an alumni network, is actually quite strong. You can initial days it was very useful when Utkarsh was talking about a consulting project to actually meet folks who were in the corporate to talk about this. Later on in the entrepreneurial journey as well, there were a lot of times when you had to pull on expertise, you had to pull on business strategies, right, and learn from the best out there. So in that sense, it helped a lot. And since we were doing a tech product, and both of us are not techies in the truest sense of the word, right, we don't know the coding part of things. Getting that network active to find the right people to join us on the journey in terms of the technical expertise and shop was also very, very useful. Even now in the current scenario, a lot of our angel investors are from these networks. So that is something that is, priceless in every step of the way.
That's wonderful to hear. Tell me a little bit about your team composition, right? And I read somewhere that one of your early investors made a statement that you guys went with the perfect set of co-founders, number 5 or something like that. Now, I don't know if there's a magic number to the number of co-founders, but how did you find your other co-founders on this journey? What happened to Momo? That was the name of your first venture, right? And how did you build it out?
So I think there is not really a magic number to it. Between being a solo entrepreneur, so I've done solo entrepreneurship, I've done along with co-founders. I think the co-founder thing is better. Simply put, when the journey is a little rocky, and especially when you're sort of turning a little pessimistic, that's when the co-founders sort of buoy you up. So it's priceless to have a co-founder or co-founders. That's what I'll say. There isn't a magic number. I think in our first venture, we were 5, and how it happened was 3 of us were from Honeywell. So me, Ganesh, Nilesh were from Honeywell. Ganesh and one of our other co-founders, Karthik, had worked at Bain together. And then finally we found the 5th guy, who was again through Ganesh's IIMB network. I think somebody who studied at IIMB, we found that connection. So that's how it came together. More or less, I felt that why Momo took this sort of thing was a large co-founder base was because personally, I felt that was the best way to share equity rather than to pay people to do the work. And we had sort of joined or come together, and each of us was thinking of entrepreneurship in our own ways. And when we met, the chemistry happened. So that's why that kind of a founding team happened at Momo.
I think it's it's not a magic number as such. I think it is more to do with, what each person brings to the table, right? If you have the, complementary skill sets, number one. Number two, individually, each of us has a role to play, which is critical to the organization, to building the company up from day zero. That is more apt to look for in a co-founder in terms of a personality and a skill set, rather than just saying, magic number is 4 or 5. So in that sense, Momo was a two-sided problem, right? You had restaurants and merchants on one side, and you had customers on the other. So you had to build both sides of the pipeline together. So you needed one consumer marketing guy, one business marketing guy, right? Sales guy, and then you need the technology stack to build, and you need the design and the product expertise as well. So there was an individual role for everyone of us to play in that setup. Right now, two of us are out there in the shoe space, right? So there is design and there is brand building and marketing. So those are the two critical aspects of building this, along with operations and supply chain. So that is the core skill set that is required, and hence 2+1 core operations guy can actually take this forward. Is the thought here? Yeah.
So this was between 2012 till about 2017-18, right?
Yeah, 2016 was where we exited. And then there was a bit of a lock-in period to make sure that all the technology gets integrated and stuff like that.
So why did you exit? This seems like a very happening space. So why did you guys exit?
So if you look at the evolution of payments in digital payments in India, there came a point in 2015 when there was a lot of action happening in the space, right? And we were scaling up. We had raised VC funding. We had scaled up to 3 cities, and we were growing the business. At that time, Paytm raised its $550 million round from Alibaba. At that point in time, it's a call whether to accelerate the efforts to go pan India, or to find the right anchor or right partner to help scale that business from a 3-city operation to a pan India space, right? So at that time, when we started talking to multiple people for a potential pan India expansion, we found that we were getting a lot of strategic interest from e-commerce companies at the same time. 2015 was an inflection point when a lot of e-commerce companies were looking at building their own stack for the payments expertise in-house, right? And launching their own wallets and payment ecosystems. That triggered a lot of conversations, and eventually it turned into acquisition conversations. So we got acquired by ShopClues, which was one of the unicorns who had raised $1 billion valuation round at that time. The fit was right. The camaraderie was there, and there was clearly a need for them to have payments as part of their ecosystem. And we had a chance to play in the larger scale operation from the startup early startup outfit that we were. So yeah, that's the reason why the acquisition happened. It worked out very well too, right? Post the acquisition, the integration happened pretty seamlessly, and then we transitioned on to Commerce Rose as well, much sooner than we anticipated it would happen.
Wow, that actually seems like the perfect trajectory, right? So you've started something, and within 5 years you actually have an exit. You have a strategic sale at that point in time. So you literally rode the wave at that point. So you caught it at the right time, and then you rode the wave. Tell me a little bit about that journey. What was it like? Did the full team get absorbed? That's one part of my question. So the second part of my question is, what was it like to go and work for another set of entrepreneurs?
So I think for us, luckily, we had a lot of discussion with the founders before the acquisition. We had multiple such offers, and so some of them said that they would like to absorb the whole team. Some of them said no, they want only the technology and the licensing part. And so we were sort of deliberating on this for almost 2 to 3 months before it actually happened. And the way we made the choice was, number one, are we going to work with the founders directly? Which means one of the things that was on our mind at that time was, having been an entrepreneur, the best fit would be to probably work with another entrepreneur who understands this space, who understands or has the ambition to grow their business rapidly, scale it. And ShopClues seemed like the best thing. They were catering to a middle India kind of an audience. They were the youngest among the people who had bid for us, and we were going to work with directly with the founders of ShopClues, and hence we chose that. Our entire team got integrated. So basically, we started like the South India operations for commerce for ShopClues. They were primarily based in Gurgaon, and so about 90% of our team got absorbed. All the founders got absorbed. It was a fun thing, and I think our hunch played out properly to work with other entrepreneurs. So there was absolutely no red tape. We got into the groove very fast. Surprisingly, whatever time we had kept for sort of doing the integrations, that got over very fast. And the moment that happened, uh, immediately Sanjay, who was the CEO at that time, moved me to a CPO position, which means from the checkout piece, I moved to the entire customer journey and merchant journey. The big thing to learn there was, of course, scale. Also to learn about a different audience that ShopClues was catering to, like the tier 2s, tier 3s, the middle India audience, and how they are sensitive to price, what kind of thought processes. So we were sort of a little unaware of these, and that was some of the exciting parts of merging into a large business. Ganesh, maybe you can share.
It's interesting, Utkarsh, it's interesting that you say that it gave you, taught you about scale, because both of you come from large companies yourselves. So scale is not new to you guys.
The corporate scale is a very different game, right? There you are talking, X% annual, year-on-year growth. Whereas when you're talking startup growth, when you're talking, high speed and venture funded growth, that is in multiples. That doesn't count in percentages year-on-year. That goes in multiples year-on-year, right? For example, when I transitioned over to the merchant ecosystem there. I took over the merchant ecosystem. We were about 1 lakh sellers on the platform. Within the 2-year time frame, we were at almost 5 lakh plus merchants out there, right? So it was growing at 4x in 2 years is a very different way of thinking about things, right? The way you approach a problem, the way you execute on the ground, the way you look at how pan-India, merchant ecosystems can be tackled, and the way you onboard and get traction for the merchants on the platform so that they can start selling and get their business going on the platform is a very different way of thinking in that sense, right?
Give me an example.
The speed is the big difference.
Yeah. So give me an example.
Sure. So when you're working with, in Momo, we worked with almost, 3,000, 3,500 merchants. Whereas when we went to ShopClues, we started at 1 lakh merchants, right? So when you have 3,000 or 4,000 merchants, you can still have a high touch kind of a relationship with the client, where they know our sales team and our account management team who are at their beck and call, if you will, right? And a close relationship happens. But when you're talking to lakhs and lakhs of merchants, you need to set up systems and processes, which Utkarsh was great at as part of his CPO role, where you employ technology in order to onboard people faster. So how quickly within 3 steps can he be onboarded? Let's not make it a bureaucratic process, if you will, with 15 different things to do. Once they come on the platform, how quickly can you get their catalog on board? How quickly can they start selling? Give them a consultative selling experience where it's almost like setting up a new shop, but it's digital, right? All of these merchants are actually having physical stores out there, but they don't understand what the nuances of e-commerce are. So it's a combination of technology, which is the merchant platform, a call center where there is a support line which they can call at any time and talk to us to get help on a very tactical basis. And then there are business growth experts who actually work in a combination of this technology plus calling basis, where as and when required, you give the right interventions to ensure that the merchant comes on board, puts up his catalog and starts selling.
Let's say if you want to sign up like 50 merchants in a day. So you can sign 5 people to be 10 merchants every day. But if you want to sign up, let's say 1,000 merchants in a day, a simple on the ground thing is that you go, you set up a kiosk, you create a fair or a mela kind of scenario where people can come. You already seeded this with some advertisements as well as on the ground activation, and on that particular day it happens. So the technology needs to go onto the mela rather than sitting from inside the office. I think that scale is also a combination of two things. One is the digital experience, and the second thing is data. So number one, the experience has to be super smooth for somebody who comes. It should be just like, okay, I can see what I need to do, and I sort of go through it in first 2 or 3 steps, and then I am onboarded. I put in my documents digitally. It gets verified, and then I sort of get onboarded onto the platform. At the same time, data should start telling you how to grow your business, what are the areas you should be focusing on, what are the merchandising things that you should do for your business. So I think that's how we grew that merchant ecosystem at Shopclose.
We'll be back after this break. Welcome back. So we're almost caught up to the present. It is November 2019, and you've just moved on from Shopclose. Talk to me about your Flatheads journey.
India is actually quite a brand-starved country, right? If you look at legacy brands in the mass space, like a Liberty or a Khadim's or even Bata, even though it is not Indian, it is considered for all practical purposes as an Indian brand. All of them are very functional in nature. If you really think about it, is there a brand with a personality? Is there a brand with an emotional connection that people have in the homegrown Indian space? I can probably think of Roche as one example, but beyond that, there is not much out there, right? So it is high time that India starts thinking brands and India starts looking at building homegrown brands. And we thought, given this space was a passion area as well, is this something that we can go ahead and try building? So that's the beginning of the journey of Flatheads.
People are either building for performance or they are building for aesthetics. Performance meaning, so for example, there's a ton of shoes you can buy for running, but can you buy great comfortable shoes which you can use for a whole day? Most of the people substitute sports shoes along with their casual dressing, but that's actually not the right thing to do, because the running shoe or a tennis shoe will actually give you more bounce, so it will make your feet tired if you use them through the day. And that was one of the gaps I have always felt in trying to substitute performance shoes for casual wear. And I also found that most of India is dominated by the leather kind of market, and there isn't much in non-leather or textile oriented. So I kind of felt that there is this space where you can build a super comfortable shoe, and the performance that we are talking for is the long day use case scenario.
Okay. Now you have some unusual names for your sneakers. Kapow and Room and something Oof, right? Is that it?
Yeah, you're
Kapows, Oops, and Wrongs. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's actually our first collection, and so these names have come from sound words, or when a superhero punches you in the comic book, you see Kapow, or you see like where you get sort of punched by Batman, you see the Flash coming and saying Wrong. So that's how these names came into existence. And we thought, for a brand that is based on a little bit on pop culture, these will be the great names to go with.
Okay, so it sounds like a fabulous journey. And then you run straight into the headwinds of COVID. Okay, so take me on from there, guys. I mean, with the entire world sitting at home and people definitely not going to work, or not even needing shoes anymore. What happens? How's it been?
Sure. April and May, once the whole lockdown hit, was a lot of introspection for us from the mid of March, actually, in order to try to figure out whether there is an existential crisis out there. What do we do? How do we deal with this? During this time, we listened to a podcast from VCs who we know. And we heard Kamal from Fireside talking about this. He said that there are two ways to look at this crisis, right? Number one, if you're an existing brand, this is probably the worst time for you, right? Sales is not happening, demand is completely down, shutters are closed. It is the best time for you to just hunker down, get into the trenches, optimize your costs as much as possible, and just wait this out until things get better, right? Whereas if you look at it from a new brand perspective, this is probably the best time for you to play, right? There is not much competition, so you can actually get customers at a much better cost of acquisition, if you will, customers are more receptive because they've got time, they're listening, right? And they are a little more open to communications going through, right? So that is one. Second, offline is completely shut, right? So there are no shops open, and we don't see shops getting a lot of traction anytime soon, which means that online players have as much of an equal playing field as your legacy incumbents. So if you look at it from a new brand perspective, this is probably the best time to go and create a new brand. So, we could either go hunker down, or we could take the new brand approach and say, you know what, this is a great time for us to learn. This is a great time for us to build our foundations in the digital marketing business. This is a great time for us to be seen as a little different, and start having close and tight communications with our intended audiences. And that's what we did. Incidentally, once the lockdown was partially lifted, June has been our best month ever. We've actually doubled our business from pre-COVID month of March. And it has actually played out that way. At our micro level, at the sizes which we are, I think there is still demand. People are still looking to explore new brands. People are still resonating with the value proposition of an all-day sneaker. And there are also innovations that we are looking at going forward. So, Kush, maybe you should touch upon that as well.
Yeah, so I think for us, it was really good that it happened early in our journey. And so as we were planning our next collection, we encountered this whole COVID scenario. So like Ganesh said, there was a month of time for us to sort of figure out what we are going to do next. And we, after a brief introspection, we said, okay, I mean, this is going to be the new normal and it's here to stay. So we quickly sort of started looking at what people will do when the long drawn COVID drama sort of plays. And we came up with 2 or 3 themes. So for example, one of the themes that we looked was health and wellness. So people will focus, since they have the time, they'll focus on health and wellness. We also found out another unique theme, which is 2 mile radius. And so mostly people are going to be within their 2 mile of their residence. They're going to use it for a little bit of fitness, maybe walking. They're going to buy groceries and stuff like that. So can we build something for that? And of course, the third thing that we decided to work on was lifting spirits, which means while there's a lot of naysayers and a lot of depressing kind of an environment. So how can our product actually be something that can lift people's spirits? And so these are the 3 or 4 collections that we are now coming out with for the new normal. So yes, I mean, despite the initial sort of worrisome thing that, oh, I mean, is it existential crisis for us? We sort of rebounded from it, and we are sort of looking at the positive side. Being an early stage business, it's also easy for us to be resilient to such things.
Excellent. I think with more number of people, something that you said, right? June being your highest month, you've had maybe some pent-up demand, and also the fact that no one else is advertising and everyone's looking at their phones for some kind of entertainment, your ad gets shown more, and they're more receptive to trying out new things. So that's fabulous. Okay, so now I have a rapid fire, right, for you guys.
Okay.
Okay, so 3 questions, quick answers, and then we'll close. Okay. First question: how many pairs of shoes do you need to own to be called a sneakerhead?
3 digits minimum, but sky's the limit.
Okay. Ganesh,
I'm not
number?
I'm not a sneakerhead by any stretch. I'm not even a shoe addict. But yeah, I have at least 5 or 6 pairs that Utkarsh has handed down to me, brand new, because it didn't fit him. So yeah, that 3 digits, Utkarsh more than makes up for it from our perspective.
Okay. Okay, second question. How many pairs of shoes does the average Indian male own?
3 pairs, 4 pairs.
What are you saying? That's it? Okay.
Yeah, women have a lot more. Men, so typically there is one gym shoe, there is one office shoe, there is one sandal, which is something to be worn with shorts at during weekends and stuff like that. And there is one occasion shoe which you will use during parties or hangout times. There are also other casual shoes that come into picture after that, based on what they like. But the average consumer, as Utkarsh said, has about 4 pairs. If you look at the urban customer, they own about 7 to 8 pairs, right, in the top 30 cities. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay, so and the last question, which brand, besides Flatheads, of course, continues to inspire you guys?
For us, I think it is, so one of the brands we really admire is Uniqlo, and fantastic kind of products. All around the year, you can walk into a Uniqlo store and always find a Uniqlo store and find something that you really like. So yes, along with their UT range of clothing, it's a big inspiration for us.
In terms of the way people have upended traditional business models, I think number one, Zara, looking at limited edition fast fashion as a space and completely reorienting their entire supply chain to make that business model happen. I think that's a big inspiration. We are also looking at short burst limited edition as one of our propositions out there, along with the technical signature lines that we want to do, just like what Uniqlo is doing. In terms of creating customer hype and customer frenzy, if you will, Supreme is one brand that I really respect from a brand and a marketing perspective. Lots of lessons to learn there from how do you build brand perception and how do you get customers to really go after your brand and get associated with you emotionally.
Okay, thanks guys. Thanks for that scintillating conversation. You've taken a crisis and you've definitely not let it go waste. So more power to you guys, and hopefully you'll have a women's range soon.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Popular theories on startups and founders state that the average Indian founder is a young 20-something IIT grad who is happy to live on Maggi and do the bidding of his investors. But Utkarsh and Ganesh, and more like them, are proving this hypothesis wrong. There is something to say about building a strong foundation backed with experience and expertise, taking calculated risks, and riding the wave. The rewards can be rich and fulfilling. That's it from me. Leave a voice message and I'll include that in the next podcast. Until then, stay healthy, stay safe.